I'm Matt Carey, documentary editor. Deadline, welcome to the Deadline studio at the Sundance Film Festival. We are joined by Amy Berg, the director of It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, about the late musician, singer, songwriter, and also by Ben Harper, who is, of course, the famed musician himself and was a great friend of Jeff Buckley's. Thank you for being with us, and congratulations on your premiere.
Thanks for having us.
So, Amy, for those who may not remember Jeff, he passed away in the 90s. Remind us of this talented man and the impact that he had. Only came out with one album in his relatively short life.
Well, Jeff Buckley, actually, his album Grace is consistently considered one of the greatest albums of all time. And it was his only studio album that he released in his life. He died at 30 years old in 1997. And it's an album that when you discover it, it just hits you on such a deep level. He has a haunting, beautiful way with lyrics and his vocals. And when I was in my early 20s, I first heard Grace, and it was just an album that just kind of healed me through the kind of hardest times in my 20s. And his voice just magically gets into your soul.
Ben, you recount this in the film, but when did you meet Jeff, and what were your initial thoughts about him?
I met Jeff in 1995, and it was the first time I had met someone who I admired to the point of idolization that was my own age.
Very interesting. Yeah. When you first heard him sing, because the voice in some ways was his greatest instrument, which is saying something because he was a very gifted guitarist and multi-instrumentalist. How would you describe that voice and the power that he could achieve? The higher he rose, the higher the octave.
You just hadn't heard anything like it until he came along. It was as singular an instrument as has existed in the world of sound.
Yeah, absolutely. There aren't really any parallels. I'm not sure, but I thought a little bit of Roy Orbison in the sense of someone with tremendous vocal range, but also who got more powerful the higher he
rose. The word power, I think, is the critical term, because it was as powerful and raw. It was equally as vulnerable and fragile, and to have those two counterpoints all within the same instrument was just something unheard. And mind you, of course, it's like Roy Orbison and Robert Plant, the great singers that we know of in rock. It hadn't been that extreme on both sides until Jeff, because his to be that raw but that elegant at the same time, and to be that powerful yet that fragile at the same time was just shocking.
Amy, I can see why you wanted Ben in the film, both for how he can talk about Jeff and, of course, his personal relationship with him. We see Jeff's mother, Mary Guibert, in the film. Can you talk about how the project came about, working with Mary, and then getting access to really rare materials and recordings of Jeff?
Yeah, well, this is kind of a real love story for me, because I made my first film, Deliver Us from Evil, in 2006. And after that, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to continue making films. I just kind of wanted to make that film at the time. And when I thought about a follow-up, it was Jeff Buckley. And so since 2008, I have been trying to get access to this story. And I finally met up with Mary in 2010. But she didn't give me the rights for another 9 years. So but every time I finished a film, I would reach out to Mary. She did share the archive with me back then, and I was blown away by the voicemail messages and the DAT recordings and his candor. And I just kept at it. I always wanted to tell a love story about Jeff, because he brought so much love and authenticity to his music. So I chose people that had a real deep connection with him to be in the film, and it is a love story at the end of the day.
Yes, you interviewed a number of the people that he was involved with romantically, but it's a love story between mother and son, and not an uncomplicated one, as we see in the film. Mary was quite young when she had Jeff. She was
17.
That's young.
And abandoned by the father at that age.
Right.
So.
Tim Buckley, who himself was a rather extraordinary vocalist and musician. And that's an important part of the film where Jeff really, for many reasons probably, and some of them being the fact that his father wasn't really part of his life, was so resistant to any comparison to his father.
And also, when I say a love story, his love story was also with music. And so his love story was with people like Ben, Michael, Ty, Matt Johnson, who will be there tonight. I mean, he had really, really deep relationships with people that he had a musical synergy with. So it was always about the music for him.
And Ben, did you sort of sense or realize that I probably don't want to ask Jeff about his dad? We see some archive interviews where he's really bristled at that.
Well, the first time I met Jeff, he came and put his guitar around my neck and said, would you show me some of your guitar stylings? And I just laughed. I said, Jeff, I can't show you really anything because, like you said, quiet as it's kept, he was a monster guitarist. So I was a bit intimidated. No, show me. You do that one thing. And then, I mean, that's where it started. And it really was never about family origin or anything other than just the joy and excitement of where we both were musically. Yeah.
And Zeppelin superfan.
Zeppelin superfan. And plotting on how we were going to get as close to Page and Plant as possible.
Well, we see pretty close, and at one concert, Jeff was scaling the scaffolding, which seemed a little bit dangerous, but he wanted to absorb the music, shall we say.
Crazy. Yeah, I when I made West of Memphis, I was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I ended up sitting across the bar from this guy because he had played a show for the West Memphis 3, a benefit show, and Ben told me that story, and that was like a major driver for wanting to make this film. So
when you called me and told me that footage existed from a hot air balloon, I had to see it to believe it.
It was crazy.
Yeah, that was
crazy. Yeah.
His legacy in terms of a musician. I mean, one thing you explore in the film is that in the 90s, maybe people don't remember it, that was the grunge era. And Jeff was anti-grunge, really. Not
really,
willfully,
though.
just his style was not that.
But he loved grunge, and he loved certain he loved Soundgarden, he loved Bad Brains. He just loved music. And so I think that he defied genre, as Ben defies genre to this day. But I think that people, I mean, if you were to see a live Jeff Buckley show, he would be playing a lot of like MC5 and Bad Brains and covers that were not what you would expect from Jeff Buckley.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to say Jeff was anti any music, but I hear you. He shocked the cultural system when he came out as being something that no one had really ever heard.
Yeah, and by anti meaning just his vocal style, and that by all means he wasn't against the music.
That he could apply that voice to a sound as powerful as grunge. It was just I'll never forget the first time I heard it. I was like, I could not believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It really was a shock to the system. But mainly, more than anything, man, I'm just here as a disciple. I'm truly one of millions of disciples of Jeff's who feel that it's time he get his flowers. I mean, not a rose garden now and again, or in France or in Australia, but I mean, every flower that can push up, that the earth has to push up, should arrive at Jeff's altar.
Right. Wow. And it's almost like...
But I mean, even, like, I'm talking about, like, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame shit. I'm talking about honorable Grammy. And it starts with Amy's extraordinary film. And I think that's where it should lead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's almost like you were saying he was I mean, I know what you meant. He was,
Thank you.
His voice was so extraordinary that it didn't seem like it would fit in the grunge world. But there is this resurgence today, and it's almost like Jeff is the answer to the disconnected world we live in, because young girls in their bedrooms with a Grace poster talking about how somebody can actually see them, and if they could only have a guy who would write "Lover, You Should Have Come Over" about me. And there is this deep need for connection today because we're so disconnected. So I feel like he's also coming in as an answer to that, as he has throughout the last 27 years, for different events in pop culture.
Mary Guibert is one of the executive producers, so is Brad Pitt. What can you tell us about distribution plans for the film?
Well, it's for sale.
Okay.
And
All right.
something about Brad Pitt is that when Jeff passed, Brad had helped Mary to digitize the entire archive. And so that was his contribution. And when we were almost finished with the film, I actually reached out to his manager and wanted to offer him that, the opportunity to see it early because it's a lot because of him. So anyway, that's the connection there. But Mary and Brad go way back. So.
Well, congratulations on the film and premiering at Sundance.
Today
returning
is the
to
day.
this
Oh my
festival.
God. Today is
Congratulations.
It's
the
very
day.
exciting. The film is It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, about the late musician, vocalist, songwriter, extraordinary performer and individual. We've been joined by Amy Berg, the director, and the musician Ben Harper, great friend of Jeff Buckley's. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.